So, I, uh, I used to work at Target. I worked there for almost 4 years of my life. And, in that time, I definitely learned a lot. But what I also learned was that Target just generally didn't have, ooh, excuse me, Target just didn't have people's health in mind when it came to actually, you know, keeping people safe.
Hmm.
Um, because we never enforced mask policies, even though that was a state, or that was a
Stay where it was a major concern.
mm-hmm, that was a guideline that was that was in place, but everyone was just like, oh no, thank you, no, thank you. Like we never actually enforced it, which I always found the stupidest thing because if we have a situation like COVID where you have a very real chance of actually catching of actually catching COVID and being in a situation where your health could very well be in danger, you know why are you why are you not enforcing it as much as possible? But that's not really what really drove me to quitting, because like my store was horrible in the way that it never actually managed to fix any problem that it had. It would just put it off to the side and be like, okay, we'll fix it up later. And it never, ever, ever did. It never fixed any problem that it had, especially problems which, in my position, where I was a card attendant, um, I was, very adamant about the fact that I didn't want to work with broken carts, and 90% of our carts were broken. And they never fixed them. We had a PML, who's like the person who actually like goes and fixes the carts. We had a PML who would actually do that, um, and then that guy ended up quitting.
Hmm.
But what really, like, 100%, like, just drove me, like, to quit I was already having problems with most of our HR managers, and every single HR manager that joined seemed to get worse. Um, the last, HR manager I had, um, what ended up happening was I went away to my dad's out of state for a weekend because my parents my mom, my stepdad were going down south to go do something. I forget what specifically, but they were staying with a relative of mine. And what ended up happening was I ended up uh, I ended up having to quarantine because not only did my mom and my stepdad end up getting COVID while they were down there, so they had to quarantine at my relative's house because they didn't want to like go on a plane and risk anybody getting sick because they're smart people. But what also ended up happening was my dad and my stepmom also ended up getting COVID, so I wasn't going to, leave and cause a risk of like somebody quarantining. Um, but what ended up happening was I called my store and I was like, "Hey, everybody I know has COVID. Like I'm quarantining for the sake of, like I don't want to come in and get anybody sick because, I'm not a moron. If I am like living with people who have a very contagious disease that has been known to kill people, I am not going to go back to work until I know for a fact that I
That
am
you're
100
healthy.
that what?
That you're healthy.
Yeah, like that I'm healthy. Yeah, like 100%. Like I'm not going to go back to work until I know that I don't have it. So I was like, I called my boss and I was like, look, I'm gonna be quarantining for a week. I called the HR manager specifically, who was a fucking bitch, and I hated her. Um, but what ended up happening was my was I called and I was like, hey, look, I'm going to be quarantining, and I need to, I need to take a couple days off from work, to make sure that I'm not going to come back and, get anybody sick. And what ended up happening was, she was like, "Oh, so you're going to have to call out every single day that you're going to be staying out." And I was like, "No, I'm not going to do that because this is like literally a medical emergency, and I have not had to do that at any other point." Any other point in time that I've been working there, nobody's, made me do that. And what ended up happening was, I just said to her, like, on the phone, I'm like, I'm not going to do it. I don't know if I said I'm not going to do that, but I flat out told her, like, this has never been something that I've had to do in the 4 years that I've been working, or almost 4 years that I've been working there, because I don't want to get, like, but what ended up happening, by the end of it, was I called out for one day, and I said, "Hey, look, everybody I know has COVID. I don't have a way to get back home." And, I was out of state. And I called a person who used to be the manager at the front of the store where I worked. And what ended up happening was I called him, and he was really sweet. He was like, "Okay, no, it's okay, I understand, we'll see what we can do." And I thought that was the end of that. But what ended up happening was I didn't call out the next of the 2 days that I had, that I was quarantining. Because I thought, again, I thought that was the end of that. He sounded like, that was pretty much like about the last thing that needed to be done. I went back to work, the next day that I was scheduled. Because keep in mind, I was out of state, I don't have a driver's license, and I was quarantining. I had literally no way to get to work. And what ended up happening was, I just did my work for the day. I think I had like a 6 or so hour shift. And my supervisor then calls me into the office literally near the end of the day and is like, "Hey, we need to talk about something." And he's like, "So why didn't you call out those 2 days that you were out?" And I told him because I was calling out for a medical-related emergency. And mind you, this isn't the first time that I've done something like that, because back during the week of Christmas, might I add, the week of Christmas specifically, I had to call out for a whole week because I ended up getting shin splints, and obviously with my job, I can't, walk around with shin splints.
Afford to have it with that.
Yeah, like I can't do that. That's not something that I can afford to do, because that's gonna fuck up my legs. So what ended up happening was, I was like, "Look, I called out for a medical-related emergency. I did that at the ending of last year. I did that at the ending of last year." And he was like, "Yeah, but it doesn't count this time." And I'm like, "Why? It was a medical-related emergency. I didn't have a way to get to work. I was out of state, and I was quarantining with people who have COVID." And he was like, "Did you test positive yourself?" And I'm like, "No, but that's not the point. Because even if I did a rapid test, I wanted to make sure that everybody in my house didn't have symptoms before I made the decision to come to work." And he was like, "Well, it's still against our policy, so we're gonna have to write you up for that." And at that point, I was like, "Yeah, no, that's the final straw." And what ended up happening was that very day, I went into the back office and I called my mom, and I was like, "Look, I don't care what you say. I'm quitting." And she was like, I understand. I'm not gonna stop you. Just make sure you put in your 2 weeks notice." So I went back in. And there was a really nice manager of mine who used to work at the front as well, and she's been an awesome person to work with. And I was like, "How would I go about filing for a 2 weeks notice?" And she was like, "Okay, well, you have to talk to your supervisor and all that, and then you have to go and talk to HR, or not talk to HR specifically, but you have to go into the store's website, and you have to file in that you're quitting." And then I went out to my supervisor, and I was like, "Hey, look, I am, you know, it's been an honor working here. You guys have taught me a lot. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to be putting in my 2 weeks notice. And keep in mind, this was like not even the straw that broke the camel's back necessarily. This was like the telephone pole that broke the camel's back, because I was like, I was so, like,
Sick of it.
I wasn't even so, like, necessarily sick of it. I was just, like, in absolute shock at the fact that, you know, I said I was trying to keep out of work for the sake of keeping everybody healthy, and they were like, oh, but we can't do it in terms of policy. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure policy didn't change enough for that to matter when COVID, you know, first became a thing, or at least when it was, like, a thing where, you know, we had a mask policy that, by the way, Target didn't enforce, at least not the store that I went to. We never enforced that policy. We never made somebody, you know, not come into the store if they didn't want to put on a mask, even though, like, every other major store did that. But what ended up happening instead was, I went out there and I was like, you know, hey, you know, it's been an honor working with you. I'm putting in my 2 weeks notice. And the look of, like, defeat on his face just told me that he never expected me to quit. He expected me to just put up with bullshit. And what ended up happening was he said, okay, in, like, such a defeated voice, like he knew that he had lost. And I went into the back office and I filed for a 2 weeks notice in the store's website. I spent the next 2 weeks, you know, just absolutely, you know, enthralled with victory in the fact that I finally didn't have to work there anymore, because it was literally making my mental state so much worse. And then after that, I never went back there. I finished up my work, never went back there, still haven't gone back there to this day, and it's been like 3 months, almost. So it just goes to show you that, you know, for anybody out there who is a management employee, you know, treat your employees nice and make sure that, you know, if they're putting the store's interest above, you know, their own, even in the or their own interest above the stores is what I meant to say, because I obviously didn't want to go outside in public when I had fucking COVID. You know, like, make sure that when you talk to them and, you know, you enforce the fact that, hey, you know, you're going to need to, like, just make sure you're being nice to them. And if they're calling out because of COVID, like, make sure that, you know, like, I don't know, like, to me,
Just go easy on 'em.
yeah, because it seemed very scummy to me at the fact that, I'm just gonna run around here so I can finish my thoughts. It seems very scummy to me at the fact that both the HR manager and my supervisor didn't really seem to care about the fact that I was
You were
staying
doing
out.
it for a health reason.
I was doing it for a health reason, and even though, yeah, I tested negative for COVID, that's not really going to matter much if I end up going to work on the very last day and then I still, you know, have symptoms and all that. Like, I was just doing it so nobody got sick. And
Yeah.
the fact that they felt the need to write me up over that, I found absolutely insulting and appalling. And at the end of the day, I just didn't care at that point. I was like, you know what, fine. If you don't want to, if you're showing such disdain, excuse me, for the fact that, you know, one of your own employees is making sure that nobody else is going to get sick, then I have no interest in working for you anymore. And yeah, so that is why, after, God, a long-winded explanation, I've been ranting now for probably like a good 10 minutes or so, that is why I ended up quitting my job at Target. When my supervisor asked, you know, like, was it because of what we just talked about, I of course lied and said that it wasn't, but I wasn't telling him the truth because I didn't really feel... But yeah, because fuck him. He was a great person, not a great supervisor, is what I'll say.
I'm pretty sure if he was able to bend the rules, because if he didn't have to act in the company's interest, I'm pretty sure he would have been a better supervisor, maybe.
I wouldn't even say that. My main issue with him just came down to the fact that after a while, I think he just stopped giving a shit. I think everybody at the store just stopped giving a shit. Everybody stopped, following rules. Everybody stopped, doing things out of their own interest. Everybody stopped just, people just stopped caring. And when it comes to a store like that, I had the customer's best interest in mind. I was like, look at this. Look at this situation. We have so many, broken carts. We're going to need to actually, fix some of these if we want to get, if we want to get, time, if we want to get, enough carts in for the holidays. And every time I talked about that, it was just like, oh, well, we don't have, yada 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 reason to do so. And and again, once I just reached a point, I was like, okay, you know what, I've had enough. I have had fucking enough. I reached a point where I was just like, this company clearly doesn't care about the employees, or at least my store didn't. And I gave up. I was like, you know what, fine. If you don't care about me, then I don't care about you. I'm quitting.
Understandable.
Now, look, I don't mean for this rant, if this does end up, getting uploaded, I don't mean for this to discourage anybody who currently has a retail position, but what I'm going to say, and this is something I'm going to, try to, finalize my thoughts on this from, is that if you do have, a retail job, just know that you don't owe anything to the company that you're working for, and if they're treating you like shit, then leave. Because, I get that you might not want to, in the case of, you need a job or whatever, but I'm going to say that your job is going to start mentally draining you if you don't take care of yourself first and foremost. Because that's what happened to me. Wow, that rant actually kind of helped me beat this boss. You won the Pendant of Power. The power over deciding whether or not you want to work a shitty job. Your goal of finding 3 pendants is in sight. Go for the last one.